let's talk about the NFC East. Before I do, I want to remind everybody out there the 2020 Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide, if you can see it on the camera for our YouTube crowd. I will say this, like, if COVID impacts the season, I am letting everybody that buys that Fantasy Football Guide, if you want to put your mind at ease, just buy the book. You can find it in the link below. It's on Amazon. And I'm giving it away if the season is canceled this year for any reason, like the pandemic, and you sign up for the email updates, I'm just going to give you the PDF for 2021 for free. So there's no risk in buying the book, and also it's just better, better sleepers, better sleeper math-driven sleepers, better draft tiers, better rankings. It's just people who use it win their league. I don't know what else to say. But let's talk about the Cowboys, man. So. Yeah, I mean, we talked about them a lot last week, but let's just talk about them with looking forward. So they added CeeDee Lamb. This is interesting because McCarthy, you're very familiar with McCarthy being a Packers fan. You know the scheme. You remember the years where Brett Favre was on his way out and Aaron Rodgers took over. And I could see some similarities, not between Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott, because I certainly wouldn't make the comparison. But I could see the similarities between, you have kind of a young, back then thought of as a raw quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, Favre out, Aaron Rodgers in, and Aaron Rodgers did okay, like statistically, his rookie year, did actually very well statistically, but the team didn't win any games.
6-10, right?
6-10, I believe. But Rodgers, I think, threw for like 4,500 yards. I feel like that's, I don't have the stats in front of me. But I mean, how do you think Dak's going to fit with McCarthy? Do you think this is something that's going to work? Do you think it's an odd fit? How do you feel about that, knowing McCarthy?
My instinct is that McCarthy is going to hamstring him, and he's going to that's my instinct. I don't think it's going to be Dak Prescott throwing 40 times a game. Mm-hmm. I think the goal for this team this year will be to rely on that strong defense and running game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the formula that Mike's going to go with, because from what I could tell, he leaned that way even when he had Aaron Rodgers. Look, I could be wrong. You never know what's really happening out there to the fullest. But it was like, what is happening here? I think that he's going to really play it safe.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking as well. And again, just kind of another little plug for the Almanac here. I really delve into the offensive systems and the play calling and all that stuff. Now, they kept Kellen Moore, but this is going to be a McCarthy-led offense. It's going to be his playbook. Maybe Kellen Moore will call plays. Maybe he won't. Go ahead.
Would that be a bad strategy? I mean, look at the makeup of the team. No. I mean, their O-line is great. You got that running back who's just fantastic, dude, and you can lean on that all the way through the season.
The offensive line's still awesome.
Exactly. Have him throw 18 to 24 times, right? Mm-hmm. If he completes 15 of them, they may be the highest quality 15 completions of the week. You know what I mean?
Right.
One of those type deals.
Actually, you know what? Like what Kirk Cousins does in Minnesota, right? I mean, this team, the Vikings have moved to a run first with Dalvin Cook, and they have Alexander Mattison, Gary Kubiak being the offensive coordinator this year, but it was Stefanski the last couple of years. And people talked about, hey, Kirk Cousins isn't throwing the ball 50 times a game, but he's Kirk Cousins. I mean, he is super efficient. Say what you want about the guy. I mean, when you look at his season-long numbers, you're like, wow, that was a pretty good season. Now, maybe he doesn't always rise to the moment, but that's what Dak Prescott could be this year. And I agree with him, man.
And they could do the opposite of what we see in Matt Stafford. Stafford is always throwing for 5,000 yards, and not one of them ever means a damn thing.
Right.
The complete opposite of that, super valuable, and kind of like a buttoned-up, tightened force, right? Yeah. Just efficient machine like that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, man. And I think tactically the best thing to do is to lean on that offensive line and the running game. You have Ezekiel Elliott, who is arguably the best three-down back in football, the best running back in football. I say arguably because I'd put Nick Chubb actually in terms of, and of course, Christian McCaffrey up there in terms of like physical talent. And a lot of this stuff manifests itself within the system. But I think, when they hire McCarthy, people think about Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball like an artist, for years. And what I did,
artist is a good way to put it.
Yeah, and when I looked back at McCarthy when Rodgers took over, is he did lean on that run game. They had Ryan Grant, they had for years, they had other pieces there, and over the course of Aaron Rodgers' development, they add Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb, and Devontae Adams was there towards the end, but they had it was Jennings, kind of at the beginning of that run. And the Cowboys, you can see in terms of personnel, now they have Michael Gallup, who I like. Of course, Amari Cooper, who I think is overpaid now, but, they have him. And CeeDee Lamb, who they add in the draft. 3 really good receivers. Tight end, Blake Jarwin, but you still have Ezekiel Elliott in that offensive line. I think that McCarthy's going to do the right thing here and make this a run-focused team. But like you said, Brad, I think it's going to be kind of like laser-like precision in the passing game when it happens. I don't know what we'll see. Before we get to the over and under, Brad, let me just clean up the key additions and key losses here. They lose, some pieces. Let's see here. They lose Byron Jones to Miami. They lose Collins, talented defensive tackle, a safety, a couple of depth guys in the offensive line, Robert Quinn. I mean, those are losses, but then you look at the additions, and they added some pieces as well. To me, what this says, and I've always felt this way with Dallas in the recent years, is that they are a team that doesn't really develop a lot of depth that will stay there long, because they're such a star-driven franchise that they pay their stars, and then you have less in the cupboard. And a lot of these stars are getting contracts, especially with Dak. That's a lot of money devoted to the top of your food chain. I'm worried about the depth of this organization, but that's on McCarthy's shoulders and that coaching staff to groom some players and bring them along. But the offense, I think, will be successful. The offensive line, man, they lost Fleming, they lost Sua Filo, but basically they lost some depth guys in the offensive line, and you need those guys. You can't, as we've seen with the Redskins losing their entire offensive line 2 years in a row, you can't count on 5 guys in the trenches being healthy all season long. So we'll see what happens there. But let me say this, Brad. So we got the over and under for the Dallas Cowboys, according to Bet Online, 9.5 wins. How do you feel about that?
I put them at 9.
You put them at 9, so you're on the under there.
I am on the under, yeah. What about you?
I agree with you. I think they're a 9-7 team, just because that depth concerns me. So we'll see what happens there. But there's, whenever you're taking an over a new team, you got Dak Prescott. He's learning a new offensive system. But hey,
also, I think McCarthy, he's not going to be used to having an owner like Jerry Jones, and maybe that's going to influence him and kind of be clunky and maybe take a little bit to work itself out organically. Right? I mean, there may be some growing pains there between those two.
Yeah, and don't forget, they haven't been able to practice. Like Dak Prescott, when you get a new coaching staff, you get an extra mini camp.
Right.
Their rookie receiver who's really good. I'm sorry, receivers, as you talk about on the show quite often, Brad, out of all the touted receivers, usually maybe one really breaks through and has like a really strong season as a rookie. Usually it takes a few games.
Yeah.
Rookies don't have mini camps.
I know, not good. Not a good recipe.
Yeah, so I'm on the under as well. I think they'll be a good team, and I think that going forward they'll be, a strong team, but I'm worried about kind of those depth guys in the offensive line. I think that's going to rear its head, especially this year. I mean, as I've been telling people and readers in my almanac, I mean, think about this, Brad. Again, not to take a COVID tangent, but this is a reality of the NFL this season. I was saying to people, okay, so you have week 14 of the NFL season. Baltimore Ravens play on Monday Night Football. Pretend, and fantasy football players are usually week 15, week 16, right? Pretend you have Lamar Jackson. You're riding him all year. You're scoring a lot of fantasy points. Monday morning, he comes in. He tests asymptomatic, but tests positive for COVID. Boom.
Yeah.
14-day quarantine. He's out for 3 games, Monday night, and then the next 2 weeks for the quarantine. He's out of your fantasy football. This is what we're going to see with every position. You're talking about the offensive line. You're going to lose people. It's the teams with the depth that are going to be very interesting to me this year. It's going to be there. So I'm on the under as well. Let's move it over to the New York Giants. Just a reminder for our YouTube crowd here, the 2020 Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide, better sleepers, math-driven, vetted. You can look at the click on the link below, look in the basically the reviews. We're highly reviewed. Everybody who reads it comes back and keeps reading it for future seasons. My readers win their leagues. And as I was saying at the front of the show here, if you're worried about the 2020 season, don't be. If you buy the book and you sign up for updates and the season gets canceled, I'll give you the PDF of the 2021 version for free. So I'm guaranteeing it. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I think the NFL is going to be played this year. But